you, Payal. I'm going to treasure those 3 words. And of course, in addition to Payal and me, there are your other hosts for the evening, Neena, Shuli, Anjali and Ritu, who join both of us in welcoming all of you here today. I'm also, like Payal said, very interested in this evening because we have 2 exceptional men, and they are hard to find, exceptional men. That's true. That's true. That's a correction I accept. I certainly salute all the exceptional men who are Algebra members. Well, the first conversation of the evening is somebody who absolutely embodies the idea of being askance. He is an angular, idiosyncratic man, and what better to be a writer? Because really, to be a writer, you need an eye that is, as I said, idiosyncratic and angular, but somebody that really looks at the world for what it is. And Manu Joseph does that. His books have won many awards, but I'm not going to bore you with that. His first book, Serious Men, his second book, The Illicit Happiness of Other People, and the third book, beautifully titled as Miss Laila, Armed and Dangerous. Those last 2 words actually sum up Manu, because he is armed and dangerous, because his writing, both as a journalist and as an author, has the quality of an assassin with white gloves, because even as he slashes and murders, you have a sense of an ironic smile and a beautiful prose, which in a way it's wonderful that we are hosting this in a Japanese restaurant, because Manu's prose has a bit of that quality. It's precise, it has a kind of haiku simplicity and beauty. And so we are very, very happy to have Manu Joseph here. There's just one more interesting thing I'd like to say about him, that he's probably the only person in India who thinks that Narendra Modi is the new sex, and that is something we're going to talk to him about. He also thinks that Narendra Modi is absolutely built for fiction, so that's definitely on the table. And the third thing is that every writer, the tools of a trade of a writer, is to engage with the ideas of good and evil and empathy. And surprisingly, Manu is an absolute assassin on anybody who believes themselves to be good and anybody who believes that they have empathy for anyone else in this world. But he thinks of himself as an underdog and someone who writes with the eye of the underdog. So as you can see, he's a complex cocktail, and Glenlivet is good to partner with us on a man and an evening like this. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Manu Joseph.
Thank you, Shoma. That was generous.
So Manu, let's dive straight in. As I said, it's fascinating that a writer whose essential engagements in some ways with the overarching idea of good and evil in the world, in your case, you have absolutely nothing good to say about people who engage with good, people who believe themselves to be do-gooders. You call them, that there's almost a kind of sadist lurking in them because they want a cockpit seat next to suffering. And you call them kind of empathy factories, So can you help us understand this antipathy you feel towards those who have empathy and think of themselves as do-gooders?
Oh, no, it's just affection, I think. In fact, I don't call them empathy factories, they're empathy uncles. So there is a sort of a male who reaches a point in life where he begins posturing, begins to say all those things which seem very noble. I was most fascinated by this phenomenon when I realized that I'm a journalist, and all around me there were these people who were claiming that they are in a very noble profession. And there are 2 professions that I straddle, journalism and literature. And these 2 professions, people always say that journalism is moral or writing is moral. And it fascinated me that this is also the profession which is filled with jerks. But the public posturing of these people was very different. And so that's why I got very interested.
Do you count yourself in that community of jerks?
Not at all. In fact, I come from the position of an outsider where I feel that if you have chosen to be a writer, uh, you you don't choose that profession if you want to be popular or to win brownie points. You choose that profession because you have something to say. It's as simple as that, you know. So, in fact, I keep hearing from my friends when they keep saying, speak truth to the power, and how they take on Modi when they are tweeting and on the social media. But I feel the real courage is when you take on your friends, when they're talking bullshit. If you feel that you are a liberal or a socialist, whatever that means, and you feel that there are things that don't make sense in an Indian context, and your entire social network believes that, you have to stand up and tell them, no, you're wrong. I don't think so. I think that is courage. Because you see, Modi doesn't know where you live. I think it is pretty safe to take on Modi. No, that's only if you like his shawl on Twitter and then he sends the shawl home. I mean, that's kind of creepy. But if you have not linked your Aadhaar, I think, to the bank account, I don't think he knows. So I feel that that we need to take on our environment first, and that is courage. In fact, people talk about morality, ethics. I think we have had enough of ethics. What we need is courage.
So have you ever done that yourself? Have you taken on friends? Give us an anecdote which
See,
proves
now
your
I don't
courage.
have friends, so it's so it's become somewhat easy. In fact, in the beginning, I really believed in what these people, when they talked about freedom of expression, I really thought that the empathy uncles were not empathy uncles, they were just uncles, and they thought they really meant it. But then when I realized that if you write something that they don't like, that's it. It's pretty bad. They can be quite nasty. But then I also realized that when you lose friends, you actually kind of gain freedom. It's like how when you lose your hair, you gain your face.
That's a good one. So, Manu, you've also sort of, in that battle between good and evil, it's a fascinating phrase you've used, that whereas evil is a equal opportunity space, domain, and in fact it really pushes up the best of the evil, that the good is not hiring well, It's a fascinating idea. Will you talk to the audience a little more about that?
In fact, that's in the heart of what I've been trying to argue over the last 2 years, with this Modi factor rising. And then there's the other side who is saying that we are the good guys, and we are feeling horrible about what's happening in the country. But my question always was, why do the good guys keep losing all the time? I mean, there must be something, something about the good guys. Because if you want to sack Rahul Gandhi, maybe most of you should sack yourself and get the new good guys come. Because I feel that let's try to define evil in an ambiguous way, because if you strongly believe in something, you'll think the other is evil, then that's too facile. Let's say evil is a certain psychiatric condition, and that is very harmful in the short term and the long term. The central quality of evil is that, now whatever it is an equal opportunity society. The greatest asshole will always rise, because that is how the evil works. And that is how that whole phenomenon is structured. It's a survival of the fittest, and if someone has risen, it is the fittest. It's the greatest evil. Now, who is fighting these guys? I mean, it's like there are journalists and humanities professors and activists, and if I am someone who wants good to win, honestly, I can tell you that I'll be very nervous. Because to fight evil, you need to be a giant yourself. But if you have a system where the organizing principle of the system actually is not morality as they claim, the organizing principle of what is fighting evil today is subjectivity. It's all subjective, boss. It's general opinion. It's all ambiguous. You know how human nature is. We don't know, and then of course that's too weak. And you have a system which is not promoting the most powerful voices in academics, law, literature. You're not getting the most powerful. In fact, I don't think we know even a fragment of the real talent which exists, because the people who are controlling the establishment, they control everything. So how are you going to fight evil? I feel that you can laugh at Trump, but let's not forget, he's laughing too, because he's able to tell the best story. Why are you not able to tell a better story than Trump, is the question.
So, that's a valid point, Manu, that really, if we define that we are on the good side and so we are critiquing the good side from within, you're right, that the powerful stories are not coming out of there. But just coming back to you, that, you've had this tag attached to you that you're an equal opportunity offender. You're as bad to the liberals as you are to the Sanghis. So who in the Indian firmament gets your approval?
Actually, very honestly, it is the most defamed man in India, who is Arvind Kejriwal. Very simply this, when he was an activist, in fact, that is when he was gassing, because he has no stake. He has to go on a hunger strike and like Gandhi drink orange juice. Some kid will come with the orange juice and that's at the end of the fast, and then there's another fast. When he entered the political system, that's when he had stake. Then my friends in the RSS, who have of course friends in the media, they got worried because this guy is a phenomenal guy. They started telling us that he's an anarchist. And we started behaving as though we are used to some Scandinavian level of governance. When Indians talk about Kejriwal as an anarchist, I don't know what to do, because, boss, you've been in India. You're calling Kejriwal an anarchist. But because someone told you he's an anarchist. I know exactly the guys who also told you he's an anarchist. In fact, when I was the editor of Open, a very senior editor, in fact, told me, boss, we should do a story that Kejriwal has serious psychiatric problems. I even know his doctor, so those are the kind of story pitches we're getting, because it was I believe it was a systematic campaign to take on Kejriwal, and I think they succeeded. They did it very well. He is a defamed man. Now look at the standards that we have when we are judging Kejriwal. Look, it's not like we are saying that there are rapists and murderers among there. We are saying something else. It's a different bar for him. So I like Kejriwal, and then of course some people say that he is he's an egomaniac. Well, he's not an ordinary person, but any person who's exceptional will have some ego. But the funniest was when there was a coup. In fact, when he was not doing so well, I think there were two gentlemen, and one of whom I like actually. I like Prashant Bhushan. Look, you try a coup, and it fails.
You're opening yourself to many barbs, but I'm holding back.
When the coup fails, even in a piddly magazine office, they sack you. Because once you have attempted the coup to dethrone the editor, you have no chance in the office, and I think it happens in every office. And I think AAP is no exception, because it's filled with human beings. So Kejriwal doesn't want tried to dethrone him, and he evicted some people. I think it's pretty natural.
But I think, Manu, you're just living out that argument that my good is good and someone else's good is bad. Because if you're talking purely personality types, I think Mr. Modi and Arvind Kejriwal share a lot in common. They're both very powerful personalities. They don't like dissent. They strongly believe in themselves, and they have their energy. They have political energy, So it's just that they are possibly fighting for different projects, and in some ways not even fighting for different projects. So in many ways, you're basically saying if you like someone, then that structure is all right.
No, but that's a special. Kejriwal never told Muslims, you 5, yours 25, or something like that. He stood for all the values that we stand for as human beings. And then he said that something very important, though he didn't articulate it in that way. We are a country which has been destroyed by Chanakya in a way, because every time someone wants to do something wrong, you think you're a Chanakya. You think you're some very great practical person, and you think you invented practicality. The way the people talk about practicality, you feel that as though it is this generation which has. Kejriwal just has that, he doesn't have that layer where he does not argue on terms of, I'm sure he's a practical person, but he does not accept practicality as an excuse, and that makes you a very weak person when you're arguing, because now if you're being idealistic, I think it is not good for argument, you know. So Modi, I think, is a very good modern leader who's very practical, but I think Kejriwal is almost futuristic for us.
Sure. We'll come back to, as I said in the beginning, you know, you have this wonderful idea of Modi, so we're going to come back to him. But first, just moving a little more to your books, the point of view, you know, Manu, is that you've said that if you're an underdog, you see more in life. And you've also, though none of your books are autobiographical in any obvious way, but in some interviews, in some places, you've said that you always felt that you were the underdog, you felt the outsider. In your childhood, you were never invited anywhere. And now you feel like you're Harry Potter, you know, and doors are opening in all sorts of walls. So help us understand the world you came from and how much did that shape the way you write, you know?
Yeah, I grew up in Chennai in a Tambram colony. Tambram is Tamil Brahmin, kind of, where that's why you can never talk about nationalism in India, because in the south we'll say that you first ban paneer tikka. Then we talk about culture and everything, because it's a completely different world. And it was a kind of a place where we were very conservative, and if you're a boy, and as I said in my book, if you're diagnosed with a penis, you become an engineer. It's decided. It's decided. You're like JEE, and if you fail JEE, you're a shame to the family. And then later on, women wanted equality. They said, so you also write entrance exams. So they sacrificed everything, and they also started preparing for these entrance exams. And I was in a colony where a guy once got 95% in maths, and his father whipped him, and he said, you go and find that 5% and come back. He even packed his bag, you know. So as I remember the time, you know, it was, if a woman was wearing sleeveless, they thought she's a divorcee. Even now, I've never understood the connection, but it was a time where it was easy to generalize, and it was a time when generalization was truth. And even now, because of that, I think I respect generalization. I don't dismiss it. The best way to understand human beings is to be biased. Maybe 5% you go wrong, but that's okay, you know. So I come from that place, and suddenly outside, I realized, I also come from a lower middle class background, like most of us were, because when, I don't know about you posh guys, but there was a time when Indian middle class was closer to the poor than to the rich. Actually, now the middle class is closer to the rich, or so we think. I mean, if you ask Mukesh Ambani, he'll say, what are you talking about, you know? But at least in terms of perception, we all took buses, and we thought auto was expensive. Yeah. So suddenly I come to Bombay, and it was a very different world, and it is very easy for a South Indian to be considered an outsider, because not that you're thinking you're an outsider, but they are thinking you're an outsider. So I kind of began to realize, and also, of course, I joined something called Magna Publishing Company. They said they'll give me accommodation. They put me in a chawl. I don't know if you know what a chawl is in Bombay. It's a kind of shit.
They're not that divorced, yeah. Come on.
So I was mortified by this impoverishment of Bombay. So fortunately, because of that, I didn't become that kind of an. I was 21 when I came to Bombay, so I didn't become that kind of a guy who will write about jazz and how Bombay is cosmopolitan. I don't understand when people say Bombay is cosmopolitan. Because when they say Bombay is cosmopolitan, they're talking about the diamond merchants and the Parsis. They're not talking about the UP. UP guy is a migrant. So the difference between, it's like exactly how Bharatanatyam is culture and tribals dancing on shifting bamboo poles, that's folk. So I could never be fooled by semantics. So I just knew that everything was bullshit. Everything that these people are saying is complete rubbish. Where I was, it was very simple. It's like, this guy is living alone in a whole room. because there were 20 people in a, 10 to 20 people in a single room. And so they'll come and ask, and my cousins are coming, can they just stay with you? It's like, it is very simple. I said, no, after that, it's a big issue in the chawl. That, so because of these things, I ensure that as I prospered, thanks to Times of India and Samir Jain, that's why I always respect capitalists. Because the socialists, the thing was that, they were the moneyed guys, and then they made very poor investments. So their money didn't grow as fast as the new money. So they latched on to some sentiments. I feel that is the moral framework of Indian upper class socialism. But capitalists have always favored me more. I like Samir Jain. He just ensured that I could get married, very simply, Yeah.
So I've realized a lot of this really emanates from where you're positioned on the landscape. Samir Jain's good. That's good.
Shoma, you don't think so?
I didn't say that. I said that's good, that's good, that's good.
But I should tell you, even Outlook magazine was funded by a builder.
Yes, absolutely.
If it was JNU which was running Outlook magazine, I mean, they can't even run a canteen to start with. That's why I like activists, as long as I don't see them in journalism. I think activism is extremely important, and generally they're better informed than an average journalist, so they just kind of take over that space. And of course, because they can't, I mean, how much can they do? They don't know how to write, so nobody is able to read. Now, look at this whole op-ed space with very, very important issue, and it's totally unreadable, and so you think it's important. But that's what happens when they just infest. It's an infestation of journalism space. I feel that there's an element of, I like journalism to be owned by capitalism. It doesn't mean that you have to be a sellout. Ethics, I think, is extremely important to capitalism too.
In fact, absolutely. That, that dialogue between good intent and money. Money in itself is not evil. It's the deployment of it that makes it evil, and I think all of us have grappled with that incongruency between the desire to do good and needing the money of those you criticize to do the good, And definitely JNU Canteen can't back the kind of work that you or I or many other journalists have wanted to do, So we'll come to those bigger incongruities later. But because you mentioned socialism, I just wanted you to share with the audience this wonderful character in your last book, Miss Laila. The protagonist is this really athletic, iconoclastic prankster who goes about really making life hell for liberals and for do-gooding activists that Manu's pretending to like right now. In his book, they really, as I said, he assassinates them with kid gloves. But there's a wonderful passage in the book where the daughter discovers that her mother is a Maoist sympathizer and is very bewildered and keeps running to the father to understand what this all means. And the father says that, well, your mother, she works for a Chinese boss, And so the little girl looks up this Chinese boss, and I'm going to hand it over to Manu to tell the rest. And why do you feel, we'll come to that. First, just share that exchange with the...
So this Akila Iyer is a pretty horrible girl. She, all this...
Will you talk a little into the...
Yeah, so she targets these empathy uncles, like this guy who's working for rural welfare, for instance, and she makes him believe that she's from the Nobel Peace Foundation and that he's being conferred the Nobel Prize, and she's meeting him only to see if he's going to accept it, and you know how people get emotional when they are about to get Nobel, and she records all this and she makes fun of, and of course she meets a man who is a male feminist. I don't know if you're aware of male feminists, yeah, men who are feminists without being in the body of a woman, so... Come
on, Manu, that's possible.
So I'm particularly interested in these gentlemen who claim to be male feminists. They're usually over 40. So she kind of meets...
Manu, just because you're funny doesn't mean you're not challengeable,
No, you can challenge me, but I just... Yeah, we'll come to that. So she interviews these guys, and she's a prankster, but she has a history, and this is what Shoma was mentioning as a flashback. When she was a child, I mean, her mother was a Maoist, so one of the, her mother obviously was not a writer, so she had to go actually into the forest and live with the Maoists, and she thought there's going to be a revolution which is coming. So this little girl, all she wants is to be with her mother. But the mother is on to greater things, which is to be a Maoist, because when she's at home, she very dearly likes the daughter, but her eyes are always at the door, literally, not metaphorically, because some people have that personality, you can't help it. Akila then, the little girl, 10-year-old girl, she begins to read about who's this Mao. And she figures he's Chinese. So she goes and tells her papa that's okay. He's a Chinaman, who's her boss. So he said, yeah, her boss is a Chinese man. And then she figures out he's dead. And she's very happy. But she thinks that her mom doesn't know that Mr. Mao is dead. So if she informs her, she will not be a Maoist anymore. She'll come back because obviously Mr. Mao is dead. But then her papa says that no, she knows that Mao is dead. So the little girl is very confused, So Mr. Mao is the Chinese boss of this Indian lady, and Mr. Mao is dead. So what are you doing in the forest? Then she reads more and she figures from Mao's sadistic economic policies, which kill farmers, and he wanted farmers to be factory workers, that whatever her mom stood for, what her father said her mom stood for, she realized that Mr. Mao himself is not a Maoist. So she is delighted. She runs to her father and says that, do you know that Mr. Mao is not a Maoist? Will mom come back? He said, no, mom knows. So ultimately what this little girl is told that, yes, a Maoist is a person who is not exactly a Maoist, but in an Indian context it's something that you have to do in the forest with tribals. So she comes back. So that is basically the trauma of a little girl whose mother is an extremely good person. Altruism as a psychiatric condition is what I was trying to portray.
So Manu, that's why I asked you to talk this story, because you've called Mother Teresa a nutty project,
I didn't call her a nutty project. Actually, she's a Roman Catholic, which is the same thing.
Well, I hope Mark is here. I hope Mark Tully is here. But, whether it's a religion or whether it's a desire to do good, you've declared her a nutty project, just to be using a shorthand. You think of people like this character in your book, who you say is based on a real-life character, who really did sacrifice a lot to go into the forest to do good. Never mind that she didn't know how to write, but she really did spend a life and died with the tribals there. There are men like Binayak Sen and others, again coming from well-to-do backgrounds. In fact, this lady, her husband, Kobad Gandhi, was a South Bombay boy, really grew up in the lap of wealth, but spent a lifetime with the tribals, trying to bring some degree of social justice there, and is now in jail. But the point I'm making is that you really do disapprove of pretty much the entire spectrum of those who try to do good, or at least the ones that we know about. So will you define who you think are effective do-gooders?
Yeah. The selfish people. I'll explain why. Now, the activists that she's talking about, the people like us, as they're called, they would have been in a place like this, and they loved Western music, and then they got this Kida, as this called, I don't know if it's Kida or Kida. So they got, they became activists, and they got deeply involved, and they became the fringe. Now, what is going on? I feel there is a social construct behind it, a socio-psychiatric construct, I believe. It is that now, we all know that in any system there is the elite. But what we usually don't see is that we occupy many parallel systems at once. We occupy gender systems, we occupy social systems, we occupy capitalist systems, and then we occupy other literary systems, intellectually systems. So I feel that when the elite of a system, especially an economic system, when they feel they're underdogs in another system, they get really pissed. Like that's what has happened in India today, especially now. They were the old elites who have become, now suddenly they are the underdogs. We also see it in some of the television journalists in Delhi who were the elite just 3 years ago. Now they're the underdogs. Now, how do you
There's been one who's been a top dog right through. Old system, new system. Is that, is that,
I'm,
is
not,
that?
I'm talking about journalists.
Yeah, journalists.
Okay, yeah.
But you were saying selfish people are good. You know, we're going to run out of time, Manu.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
have to
okay,
be
I'll quickly finish. I feel that when the elite of a system become underdogs in another system, they have to compensate. And the only way you can compensate is through morality and what certain fabrication of a moral system to co-opt the others and say that, see, this is something bad, and for moral reasons we need to destroy. But we never gain from all this. This is just a certain fabrication. We gain when selfish people, out of self-interest, do great things.
Give an example.
Like all of capitalism, all of capitalism, it is exactly, it's self-interest, it's selfish. Yes, it needs regulation. I feel that when it comes to, let's say, children, I feel that the unit of economics has to be the span of a childhood. So you need direct intervention. You can't say a market will take care of children. No, because the first 10 years you're finished. And all of us as Indian middle class, if you're parents, you are in the business of unfairness, because we are in the business of providing unfair advantages to our children. But someone else has to take care of, I think that's where direct intervention comes. But otherwise, I feel that the self-centered ambition of people would take care of many things that activism can't.
Well, Manu, we don't have the time to really combat this, not because we are in this awful zone where the moment you begin to critique capitalism, people think that you're the servant of the dead Chinese boss, or that you're a socialist. And I think all those old paradigms are dead. But I mean, one can easily challenge what you're saying, because we've really had many, almost like centuries of capitalism now. And really in many ways and many swaths of humanity, it hasn't trickled down. Selfish ambition hasn't helped huge masses of humanity. The disparities have grown. So yes, capitalism has the possibility of doing great good, but I'm not sure it has done all of that good yet. But that's too large a topic, so we're going to move away from that. To another very interesting construct in your books is the idea of the mother. And in the illicit happiness of other people, you have a mother who's really coping with a lot of grief, an alcoholic father. Just to bring his book down to the bare minimum, there's this very accomplished young man who commits suicide at the age of 17, just going to touch 18. And the book is about his father trying to unravel why this beautiful child committed suicide. And he becomes belligerent and alcoholic, and then the mother, of course, has to cope up with all of that, and she talks to walls. And it's, again, a throwaway line in some other place where you've spoken of it as being a very mild version of your mother, That's a very intriguing opening line, Manu. You're going to have to expand on that. What did you do to your mother that made her talk to walls?
No, I don't want to talk about my mother, but she was an extremely interesting person. I remember once she was carrying a coconut in her hand, and we were walking back from the shop, and some guy brushed against her, and she just flung the coconut at that guy's head. But what I remember was that he pretended as though nothing happened, and he just kept walking. And I was a little boy, and I thought, in the adult world, you can brush against a woman, and she'll throw a coconut at you, and you keep walking. Okay, I got it.
Is that your life's philosophy now?
Yeah, when someone throws coconut at you, keep walking. Then it's okay. It's not so embarrassing, yeah. But actually, I feel that every novel is autobiographical, like a vampire stores its soul in objects. You store a bit of your soul in various characters, and you try to make it look like it's other people, and it is not. But actually, life itself is sometimes so interesting, and a literary novel has to look very convincing, and sometimes you have to tone things down all the time, and which is what I find fascinating, that I have to tone down reality, as an Indian especially, all the time. Like, for example, recently, a 98-year-old woman died, and I just learned that she didn't like the fact that everybody in her house was giving too much respect to her neighbor, one Mrs. Banerjee. So she insisted on calling her Banner, because she really thought that such a young person should not be called G. Now, because, and it is, yeah, exactly. So if we do it, if I did it in fiction, you would think that
That's absurd, yeah.
this is Chetan Bhagat kind of joke. But reality, but when I tell you that this is a fact, this is a journalistic fact, it has its own depth, because we are, we laugh at ourselves because we know that's possible. Because
So, sorry, Manu, I'm just kind of, okay, yeah. So it's time and we need to stop, but because even in the subject we promised that we're going to talk of Modi as fiction, while I quickly, we're not doing LEDs, we're going to open it up to the audience. So just while people are raising their hands, why did you speak of Modi as fiction? That he is prime material for fiction, and how does he feature in your book? You spoke of him as a hologram. Do talk about that.
so raise your hands very slowly, because it was 2014 when I wanted to write a novel, and as a journalist, but might be strange for you to hear, I'm also a novelist and a journalist, so people think that I would love topicality, but I hate topicality. I feel it's a great corruption of our times, and it's a complete invention of journalists, because most of the time news is probably something which occurs once a week or once a month. But I could not resist this phenomenon of this person who was making people behave in very strange ways, exactly like one gentleman called Lord Voldemort. I don't know if you've heard of him, one British person. It was identical, where you had to pick a side. And people I thought who were normal people were behaving in very strange ways. I thought they were normal, but then on the Facebook, they're complete nutcases. I didn't know that. And people with 2 kids, people with 2 kids are normal people because they have 2 kids. Anybody who has 2 kids, you think is a normal person because they're exactly 2. But they're completely strange, and this person was making people behave on either side. So I could not help it, and I always thought that he belonged in fiction because of what he did to people, and of course he himself is a lot of fiction. I thought that as an Indian you have to explain him a bit, or rather what he does to people, and I really didn't want to do a contemporary story, but I couldn't help it because of his personality, which I think is kind of very interesting.
Are there any questions? Yes, there's one in the corner there.
Very interesting conversation, kind of quite varied as well. While you were talking, I just wanted to ask you about when you said elite becoming underdogs. Do you think elite are responsible themselves for becoming underdogs, particularly because when they had the opportunity, you had all these scams, the coal scam, the Commonwealth scam, and the 2G scam. The point I'm making is that where this morality that you're talking about, where is this going to stay? What kind of a locus standi do the elite have to question something which is happening? And, sorry, I'm just going to take 1 minute more, because I need to understand that, okay, it's very paradoxical, because you have, let's say, no division on basis on religion when the previous government was in power. The problem which became, and why this government comes to power, is because elite were cornering all the assets and not letting the masses have that. However, religion and practicing of religion was not the question, was never the problem. Now, if you see, in the last 3 to 4 years, you have many of these reforms. Whether they've been done properly or not, that's another question.
Rajat, sorry, because there are other hands, will you
So the kind of
zero
reforms
in?
that have come in. So the paradox is that religion was not the problem, whereas this is becoming a problem now. However, in terms of if there is any barometer for fairness on economic basis, then this government is coming out very fair. What do you have to say about that? Sorry about that.
I was waiting for what you have to say.
I'm so glad. Finally, Manu has met his match.
What do you have to say? I agree.
Is there any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, we have a couple more minutes. Good. Then let me quickly squeeze in a couple more, Manu, because we have 2 minutes. So 1 minute for each question. Again, fascinatingly, you've spoken of how you're pretty much sui generis as a writer. You know, that you've said if there were, in fact, no other writers, or if you've read all the other writers in the universe, you would still only write like this. You know, so can you explain how you're a man of no influences?
So I believe, actually, I feel sometimes I feel that that is a very dicey view because you never know what you're influenced by. Or maybe I'm influenced by Tamil cinema. Because as a
Sorry, Manu, I'm just going to cut you over here because there was one question I wanted to ask you about Modi. When you said he's a hologram onto whom everybody has posited their own ideas, their own ambitions, their own desires, their own whatever, you know, hopes. What have you posited onto him?
Onto Modi, yeah. That's interesting. It's like that hair can grow after 40. Actually, this is a very interesting question in that because I was among the people when I was in Outlook. In fact, I had broken the story of this so-called midnight meeting that he had a day after Godhra, where Modi apparently had a meeting with the bureaucrats, and the bureaucrats were told to just stand back, let the patriots, vent their frustration for 3 days. But over a period of time, one thing which I have projected of myself onto him is this element of I like the way he looks at infrastructure, for instance. I have a lot of problems with him, but I think that we need someone to see infrastructure as a sexy thing, as something which is supposed to shine. You don't have to love it. There is a reason why the bullet train exists. Okay, it's supposed to be a shiny thing. And of course, there are a lot of cartoonists who make fun of it, and now there's going to be this contrast photography and how, when the bullet train comes, I'm telling you, there's going to be one photograph you're going to see, and just remember me. There'll be this poor farmer in the foreground as the bullet train runs in the background. And my only question to that contrast is so, it's like you didn't answer the question, so what is the, it's like, sari-clad scientists triumphant in ISRO, as though it is some great contrast, as though you can't wear sari and be a scientist. Similar, like what I like about my projection on Modi is the understanding that infrastructure is not something to be ashamed of. Contradictions of India is not something to be ashamed of. In fact, contradictions of India, where some things are sexy and while a lot of things are poor, is a sign that something is going on, at least, that something is happening. So I think it is time, we were ashamed of our contradiction, but I think it's time to say that yes, we have contradictions and we're not ashamed of it.
There's one other fascinating concept that I'm sure the audience would like to know is that you say that you grew up with a great sense of duty, and that it kept you from going wild. And you've been bound by a fairly narrow idea of morality. So is that one, a product of you being a Christian, own up to it, And secondly, you said, so everyone else who kind of celebrates their wildness are really pussycats in a jungle because they don't know what real insanity is, Now, you really seem to occupy a very interesting world, Manu. You have to explain what you mean by that.
Well, being a Christian didn't have. Being a Christian only told you the reassuring truth that your mother is probably a virgin, and that's fine. But the duty thing is, actually, it's very interesting because I feel that, and it's such a gender thing, especially for men. In my own, I'll kind of talking about myself, but men in general. When I look at morality as a form of logic, where there's only one right thing to do and a million ways in which you can go wrong. And I think that is why I feel it's very logical. And at every given age and time, you know what is the right thing to do. And I feel that we can frame this with duty, where duty is what saves us most of the time because we know what to do. It's as simple as that. You know the right thing to do and this is your duty. You can make a choice whether you don't want to do your duty and be a very interesting person or just do the right thing. So it is in that context that I feel that duty is what saves actually a lot of people from wilderness. Wilderness looks nice in literature, but it is also, it's wilderness. So I look at duty exactly the way I look at a form of morality, where it's a form of logic. It just, when you're confused, choose that one thing which is right.
That's a great note to end on. Especially to know that an absurdist is anchored by a sense of duty. That's a beautiful contradiction to end with. And one other conversation which we didn't touch upon, but if Manu's here over drinks, you could talk to him about, is that he really feels that India hasn't arrived at its own original idea of modernity. That we know who we are as a religious people, we know who we are as a cultural people, but that in terms of modernity, much of it is still borrowed, and that's part of the complex conversation we are having with ourselves right now, and we are transiting through that phase of arriving at the own Indian version of modernity. That would have been a fascinating conversation to continue having with you, Manu. But thank you very, very much for this very enjoyable, witty, and intriguing conversation. Thank you, Manu.